Hi-yo, hee-hey-how-ah. Hi-yo, hee-hey-how-ah. Hi-yo, hey-yo, hee-hey-how-ah. Hi-yo, hey-yo, hee-hey-how-ah. Hi-yo, hee-hey-how-ah. Hi-yo, hee-hey-how-ah. Hi-yo, hey-yo, hee-hey-how-ah. Hi-yo, hey-yo, hee-hey-how-ah.
You know, we had this whole culture camp this whole week and leading up to this pole raising here, and really none of it was about. And I try to talk to the kids too. Is the culture is not just about art. You know, we have this art form because we have people that are really connected to the land and the water and to other people, and that's where the art form comes from. Somebody asked me, you know, I've gotten that question about like the importance of cedar. As a person who's made a living off of art, it can be very difficult to sell wooden pieces. We talk about, you know, ceremonial uses is one thing, but then when it comes into commercial, I have to explain why wood is valuable to a lot of people. You know, if I'm engraving gold or something like that, they understand. It's like, oh yeah, it's 24 karat gold bracelet. Like, yeah, I don't have to explain to somebody who's non-native why that's valuable. There's a gap in between the cultures there where I have to kind of explain why a piece of wood is worth $60,000. In the old days, you know, that was our written language. There was, you know, we didn't have paper, but we still used trees to tell the stories and pass those stories down. And some of those stories are big. Some of them are clan history. Some of them are family history, village history. You know, that sort of thing. Things have been happening for thousands of years.
I was teaching at the University of Alaska Southeast in Juneau, and I got an email and phone call from Sea Alaska and Sea Alaska Heritage Institute. And they first told me that on some of their Sea Alaska lands, some of their personnel that were working on timber units, they had found what they thought was a canoe. And they asked if I would be willing to come down and check things out and see, verify or not, if there was a canoe down here. The float plane landed, and as we got off the float plane, that's when I met Dennis Pollock. And he had come in here and recognized things pretty quickly.
You know, I think by evening, most of us in Kasan were aware of the find. You know, not everybody would have spotted something like this, but Dennis has, you know, a lot of experience in the woods, and he noticed the stumps and kept it looking around and came across the canoe, and you know, right away he knew it was a canoe.
And he says, well, Dan, I've done a bit of timber work down in British Columbia, and I know what CMTs are. And as soon as he said CMTs, you know, culturally modified trees, so I thought, wow, this guy, all right, he knows the vernacular. And he says, I think you'll agree, there's a canoe up there. We got kind of over there, along the ridge over there, looked down, and I just looked over and said, you better believe it. Wow. And we both kind of, I remember smiling at him and just thinking, wow, this is amazing. You can look at it from a distance, even with a camera, and you could see how some folks would just walk past it and think it's just a nursing stump or something like that, just hollowed out.
There's at least 6 or 7 stumps that were cut in the early days here in about I suppose it's an acre area for canoe making, and some of those it's evident that the canoes were made and taken away for use.
You see that stump that's 10 feet tall, and you see the rest of the tree over here, and that's 40 or 50 feet away. The canoe was built right there. And there's something really moving about seeing that space, that empty space where that canoe was, and thinking of a crew of folks working on a canoe there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, here we go. Tool mark. Yep. Yep. Huh, that's a good one.
For some reason, the canoe that they were making over there was unfinished, and until just about a decade ago, no one remembered that it was there. Probably had something to do with changes that were occurring at the time, with outsiders coming in, and I know that there were different epidemics and things like this that interrupted people. There were also companies that were coming into the area and setting up sawmills and canneries and things like this. It could have been just an economic change. That's another possibility, that people went away to work on those jobs, and something happened in the process and it was interrupted before they finished. This whole piece of wood came off a big stump that's up here, and it was felled down in this direction. So, as we're walking along the canoe, we're looking out toward the top of the tree, which still exists out in this direction. Start seeing evidence of tool marks from here on toward the end, where people would have been using an adze and chipping it away as they were shaping the bow, into a point up here. The current condition here, of course, is a little covered up with moss and hard to see because it's been laying on the ground for an untold number of years, probably sometime in the later part of the 1800s.
As they hollowed out the inside of the boat, they removed some big chunks whole. And this right here, this flat-topped piece of, we can see on the end that it's almost like a plank, but it's probably was split out of the inside of the canoe and then laid alongside here as a platform, either to stand on or set things on or whatever. But those kind of things are pretty fascinating to see as well.
It was very clear when you look at the stumps that they were what I would call old school. They were double alcoves with adzes. They weren't flat tops with European saws. Radiocarbon dates from the canoe that have been collected will probably be fairly young. The way we were able to come up with this approximation that it was probably carved between my guess is 1860 to about 1880s, was when there was a village site. This is something that's unique in terms of Pacific Northwest archaeology. As we started realizing what we had and we've started sharing with it, I haven't found any other archaeologist that says, yeah, we've got a documented canoe yard. This whole little area has a real energy to it that's just amazing, and something to behold in terms of the knowledge we can learn from this particular site. The whole context of the other stumps, CMTs, the trees. We can learn all about their kind of forestry practices and woodworking practices by looking around at this site. Haida canoe building selected for and loved the red cedar. Some of the biggest ones that we have in museums and around today are from red cedar.
In earlier times, like in 1880 when Sonnehat built this house, red cedar would have been much more plentiful than it is now. You know, when you start looking into Haida culture, you find red cedar everywhere in the culture. And in order to, maintain the culture and keep it healthy, we need to maintain the forest and keep it healthy, as well as our water and our air and basically everything. All things are connected. Yeah, it's more than a canoe. It's really about an entire culture and an environment.
Oh.
I don't know if maybe there's no difference between culture and environment, but
A way of life, right?
yeah, it's all of those things. And it took thousands of years and generations of people growing up, learning to do this from people who had learned, and so on and so forth before them. They're critical for really the future of our culture. The Haida culture, just like surrounding cultures, have a foundation that is really based in canoe activity, and it's just kind of critical to our health, really, from now on into the future. By the end of the 1800s, the canoe making had just really gotten to a high point, and then suddenly all that information kind of silently disappeared. Dan, has a history here on the island of research, and he had been to the site before. He was one of the first people to go to the site after it was discovered. Sanjay's got, the mapping experience and all this kind of stuff. Documentation specialist, Jason Rucker, just an amazing guy with lots of experience and interest in this type of work.
So when we got to the site, it was a real opportunity for multidisciplinary work where we were using some of the latest technology. Total Station flew over the site using a drone, which gave us the ability to do LiDAR work. Of course, there was the photogrammetry work. They're sitting there, using lasers, and they're getting thousands of points of information so that they can reconstruct that in a 3D model.
We take a series of many photos around the boat from a lot of different angles. And then there's software that will use those different photos, and then through triangulation, we'll find those points in space, thousands of them, in order to create the 3D model.
Relating to the shape of the canoe, how we start out with a certain shape and then it's steamed open. Well, the initial shape is unknown. We are getting close, but we still have a way to go to reach the just incredible skill that the old timers had.
If we had gotten here a couple decades ago and could have it would have been really sweet to see some of the tool marks and stuff in the wood, but it's a little too decayed to see that here. The outside of the canoe is fairly shaped, not entirely. The end that we can see the best, the bow end, is not entirely narrowed down to its final shape. So it would be really interesting to see a number of these canoes, historic canoes that were left unfinished, and see if you can kind of place them side by side in their models and see a sequence of construction steps, or perhaps different construction techniques. That's an exciting bit of information, because now we're looking, they'll be able to look at the drawing, the model, before steaming and after steaming, and really look closely at the complex shape transformation that's happening there, and the sides coming out, the ends coming up.
Jason will produce these models. He'll be able to create the lines drawings that have, these lines of contour, just like we're looking at inside this vessel. And we'll be able to use that, as kind of students of canoe making to improve our technique, each time we do this. And in some way, I think all people in modern times are students, certainly the way I see myself. There's just a lot to learn. It's really a spirit that's trying to be kept alive. So if we go into the future and there's no red cedar to fix the longhouse, we lose the spirit, we lose the feeling. We're not going to feel healthy. We're not going to feel whole. This is not a scientific experiment. This is life, and so we can't just take it apart and destroy it in certain ways and think that's going to leave something healthy behind. It's not.
When I found out that this fellow was going to come out here with Stormy to write an article, his name's Josh Hunn. He wrote an article about Italian tailors and how this world of high-end Italian tailors has been passed down family to family. And that world is disappearing, and they're not sure if it'll continue. And he's got a line here that I wrote down. It says, "Every tradition is its own paradox. For however long it endures, it seems durable. And yet with each passing moment, the world it was created for slips further from existence." And what I thought about when I read that is that the world that the canoe was created for has gone. We don't live in a world where people need to paddle a canoe every day. And there's not a need for 30 canoes on the beach in front of Kasan anymore. There's the part that Stormy's doing is the part of showing the need for this and the still usefulness of this in people's lives. It's a reorienting our thinking about the canoe. It's not just your fishing boat, but it has a cultural significance that makes it important for Stormy to build it and for kids to get in it. And then it goes to this other deeper part about what do we do in the bigger culture to still make this tradition viable and to respect it and make the space for it.
I think it speaks to right now of the folks who are the canoe builders that we need to think in terms of forestry practices and different efforts going on the Tongass National Forest. And what do we need to do on native corporation lands to preserve, protect, and perpetuate these trees for the generations to come? We really need to think long-term in terms of the resource as a cultural resource, as something as part of a living lifestyle of cultures and people.